Tana River is Kenya's longest river, starting high on the slopes of Mount Kenya and the Aberdares, flowing for 1,000 kilometers, passing through the towns of Embu, Garissa and Garsen before emptying into the Indian Ocean at the Tana River Delta. The Tana River Basin covers an area of about 120,000 square kilometers and is home to 7.2 million people. The Tana is one of 6 river basins covering Kenya. The waters of Tana River are in high demand. Along the river course, the water is shared by many different users. It supplies 80% of the drinking water for Nairobi's 4 million residents and for people living in the watershed. It also feeds one of the country's most important agricultural areas and provides half of the country's hydropower output. With Nairobi contributing 60% of the country's GDP, the Tana River truly fuels Kenya's economic growth. And in the future, more of Tana's waters will be needed to continue Kenya's growth. New developments are being planned in the Tana River Basin that will require significant amounts of water.
The Vision 2030 is a government blueprint outlining the steps and measures to be taken to take this country to be an middle-income country by the year 2030. The High Grand Force is one of the flagship projects that are outlined. It will be a multi-purpose project, top among them being hydroelectric power, water for irrigation downstream, and also water for giving to Nairobi city, among others.
Planning developments with far-reaching impacts in a basin like the Tana River requires careful planning along the entire river, especially when there is a limited amount of water.
WARMA is basically a regulatory and management body. Our major duty in allocation is to ensure that everyone has enough water for the various uses.
Instead of looking at a single dam or irrigation project at only one point on the Tana River and considering the pros and cons, Wetlands International helped to evaluate all the potential upstream and downstream developments together to determine the overall usage along the costs and benefits of the entire basin. For example, adding an upstream dam to the Tana will create benefits for more energy and food. At the same time, there can be costs to people downstream who may get less water from the river. This study shows the cost and benefits of the different development scenarios facing the Tana River. We see a benefit of using this kind of approach in Kenya's development planning for all rivers in order to maximize smart and sustainable growth.
It would be important to understand how this river really works. Then, of course, do we understand what happens to the water availability downstream when more and more water is actually held upstream? Then, of course, what are the trade-offs on where to develop, knowing that more developments will use water that will not be available anymore downstream? So another key element is valuing nature or valuing ecosystems. This is because people and wildlife actually depend on healthy ecosystems. So ignoring this fact leads to an underestimation of the importance of having all these areas in the landscape. This is actually especially true for the outstanding nature of the Tana Delta.
Tana Delta, the most downstream part of the Tana River, consists of an impressive variety of freshwater, floodplain, estuarine and coastal areas with extensive mangroves and intertidal areas. It is one of the largest and most significant coastal delta ecosystems in Eastern Africa. It is also a wildlife-rich area with many species of plants and animals, some of which are unique to this region. Tana Delta is highly dependent on freshwater availability. This is likely to be altered by the upstream developments and activities which affect the delta communities.
It's a very fragile delta with fragile flora and fauna. And it's an area that has been cited as Ramsar site. So this is a very unique delta of its own. Tana Delta supports over 100,000 people. People depend on it, some as flood recession agriculture, others as dry season grazing area. It actually supports the animals during very dry season. That's the time when you also get some conflicts. It also supports farmers when the floods recede. It's been a very well-organized natural ecosystem. Any land use planning that does not involve the communities is bound to fail. To minimize conflict between communities and to minimize killing the delta, we need to be involved with all these other groups that have been supporting us to plan the delta use properly.
A very critical element in managing the demand for water is, of course, to include as many viewpoints as possible before making any decisions. So this will not only include all your key decision makers, but of course your users of water and other natural resources living within the landscape that may be affected by all the changes.
In the face of increasing water use in the Tana River, stakeholder engagement is critical to develop economic opportunity sustainability while improving the well-being of people in the Tana River Basin and to safeguard nature.
Any land use planning that does not involve the communities is bound to fail. So what we are simply saying is let us be involved in the planning of the use of the delta. Think of us downstream. Don't look at the immediate gains of upstream.
So for us as Wetlands International, at the policy level, we have teamed up with other organizations where we have actually ensured that there is a wetlands policy in place. So we are looking at all the ecosystems along the Tana River and we are actually giving them a value so that in a way we are able to give figures which a policymaker is able to work with.
What would make me happy is the involvement of all the players, starting with the grassroots users. We have to involve the users themselves in the management of the resource, because it's the one who suffers when the water quality or quantity is affected.
To ensure that future growth in all of Kenya's river basins is sustainable for the people and nature of Kenya, we need this inclusive and knowledge-based approach embedded into Kenya's planning.